The silence in the grand ballroom was deafening as Marcus stepped through the doorway, his second-hand suit hanging slightly loose on his frame. Every eye turned to stare at the single father who had no idea he was invited as the punchline to a cruel joke. But what happened next would change everyone in that room forever. If you've ever felt like an outsider or believed in the power of human dignity to overcome cruelty, this story will touch your heart. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories that remind us of our shared humanity. Marcus Jenkins checked his phone for the 5th time, making sure he had the right address. The towering glass mansion perched on the hillside seemed to glow from within, illuminating the night sky with its opulence. He adjusted his tie nervously, wondering if he should have declined the invitation. The babysitter was costing him a fortune, and he'd had to borrow his neighbor's car to make it up the winding private road. But the email had been clear: all employees of Pinnacle Industries were expected to attend CEO Victoria Harrington's annual charity gala, even those from the janitorial department. "You can do this," he whispered to himself, clutching the small gift he'd wrapped that morning, a handmade photo frame his 7-year-old daughter Lily had helped him make. It wasn't expensive, but it was heartfelt, and Marcus hoped it would be enough. Inside the mansion, Richard Harrington swirled his champagne as he chuckled with his circle of friends. "I'm telling you, it's going to be the highlight of the evening. Victoria has no idea I invited the janitor. Can you imagine his face when he realizes he doesn't belong here? Probably never seen a salad fork in his life." The group of executives laughed, except for James, Victoria's brother and COO of Pinnacle Industries. "Rich, that's crossing a line. Victoria wouldn't approve of this." Richard waved him off. "Lighten up, James. It's just a bit of entertainment. Besides, Victoria's too busy with her precious charity to notice. The guy probably won't even show up." But Marcus did show up, and as he handed his invitation to the doorman, Richard's smirk grew wider. He nudged his friends and gestured toward the entrance. "Showtime, gentlemen." Marcus felt the weight of judgment as he entered the ballroom. Women in designer gowns and men in tailored tuxedos turned to stare at him, their expressions ranging from confusion to disdain. His confidence faltered as he realized how out of place he was. The suit he'd purchased from a thrift store for job interviews suddenly felt like a costume. Victoria Harrington was across the room, engaged in conversation with major donors for her children's education foundation. She hadn't noticed Marcus yet, but Richard was already making his way toward the single father, his entourage in tow. Well, if it isn't the janitor," Richard said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear. "I'm surprised you could make it. Did you clean up before coming, or did you bring your mop with you?" Marcus's face flushed with embarrassment as laughter rippled through Richard's group. He clutched the small gift tighter, wishing he could disappear. "Mr. Harrington, thank you for the invitation. I'm honored to be here to support Mrs. Harrington's charity." Richard's smile was predatory. "Oh, I'm sure you are. Tell me, what exactly do you think you can contribute to a charity that requires minimum donations of $10,000? Your monthly salary probably doesn't even reach that." The cruelty in Richard's voice was unmistakable, and Marcus finally understood. This wasn't a genuine invitation, it was a setup to humiliate him. His heart sank as he realized he'd spent money he couldn't afford on a babysitter and a gift, only to be made a fool of. "I should go," Marcus said quietly, turning to leave. "Wait," a voice called out. James Harrington stepped forward, placing himself between Marcus and Richard. "You must be Marcus Jenkins. Victoria has mentioned your work. Please, let me introduce you properly." Richard's face darkened. "James, don't ruin the fun." But James ignored his brother-in-law, guiding Marcus toward Victoria instead. "My sister will be delighted to meet you." Victoria Harrington looked up as James approached with Marcus. Unlike her husband, her smile was genuine and warm. "Mr. Jenkins, I'm so glad you could make it. James, is this the employee you were telling me about?" Marcus looked confused, but James smoothly continued, "Yes, the one whose daughter wrote that beautiful letter about her father. Victoria's eyes lit up. Of course. Lily, right? She wrote to our foundation about how her father works 3 jobs to give her a good life after her mother passed away. It was one of the most touching letters we received. Marcus was stunned. Lily wrote to you? She never told me. Victoria nodded. She wanted it to be a surprise. She said her daddy was the hardest working person she knew, and that he deserved something special. That's why I asked James to make sure you were invited tonight. Richard, who had followed them across the room, looked bewildered. You actually invited him? This wasn't some mistake? Victoria's expression cooled as she turned to her husband. Of course I invited him. Mr. Jenkins represents exactly what our foundation stands for: dedication, perseverance, and the belief that every child deserves a chance, regardless of their circumstances. The room had gone quiet, everyone watching the drama unfold. Richard's face reddened with embarrassment as he realized his joke had backfired spectacularly. Marcus, still processing what was happening, extended the small gift toward Victoria. My daughter helped me make this. It's not much, but... Victoria took the package and unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a handcrafted wooden frame with a drawing of a little girl holding hands with a tall man. Written in a child's handwriting were the words, "My daddy is my hero." Victoria's eyes welled with tears. This is the most meaningful gift I've received tonight. She turned to address the room, still holding the frame. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce you to Marcus Jenkins. He's not just an employee of Pinnacle Industries, he's the embodiment of what we're trying to achieve with our foundation. A single father who works tirelessly to give his daughter opportunities he never had. The crowd, which had been silent, now broke into applause. Marcus stood there, overwhelmed by the sudden shift from humiliation to honor. Victoria continued, in fact, I'd like to announce that Mr. Jenkins will be the first recipient of our new scholarship program for single parents pursuing higher education while working full-time. His dedication to both his job and his daughter's future is exactly what we want to support. The applause grew louder, and Marcus felt tears threatening to spill. This was beyond anything he could have imagined when he reluctantly accepted the invitation. Richard, meanwhile, slipped away from the crowd, his attempt at cruel humor having transformed into a moment of triumph for the very man he'd intended to mock. As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself surrounded by genuine interest and support. Wealthy donors asked about his daughter, his work, and his dreams. One offered his wife's tutoring services for Lily. Another, the owner of a prestigious private school, offered to consider Lily for a full scholarship. By the end of the night, Marcus's life had been transformed. Not only had he been granted a scholarship to complete his education, but Lily's future suddenly held possibilities that had seemed impossible just hours before. As the gala wound down, Victoria approached Marcus again. I hope you know that you belong here just as much as anyone else in this room. Perhaps more so, because you understand the value of hard work and sacrifice. Marcus nodded, still overwhelmed. Thank you, Mrs. Harrington. I don't know what to say. You don't need to say anything. Just promise me you'll accept our help. Not just for yourself, but for Lily. I promise, Marcus said, his voice thick with emotion. As Marcus prepared to leave, he found James waiting by the door. I wanted to apologize for Richard's behavior. He doesn't represent what Pinnacle Industries stands for. Marcus shook his head. No apology needed. Tonight has been life-changing. James smiled. Victoria was impressed by you long before tonight. That's why she's also considering you for our management training program. She believes you have potential beyond your current position. Marcus was speechless. In one evening, the trajectory of his life and his daughter's future had been completely altered. As he drove home in his borrowed car, Marcus couldn't stop smiling. Wait until he told Lily about everything that had happened. She would be thrilled, not about the scholarship or the potential promotion, but about the fact that her letter had made a difference. She had wanted to help her father, and in her 7-year-old wisdom, she had found a way. The next morning, Richard Harrington found himself facing his wife across the breakfast table. Victoria's expression was stern. "What you did last night was cruel and beneath you," she said. "Marcus Jenkins is a valued employee who deserves respect, not ridicule." Richard looked away, unable to meet her gaze. It was just a joke. A joke at the expense of a man who works harder than most people in that room last night. A man who, despite losing his wife to cancer and raising a child alone, shows up every day with dignity and dedication. Victoria's voice was calm but firm. "I've been watching you, Richard. This isn't the first time you've treated people this way. It needs to stop." Richard remained silent, knowing she was right but unwilling to admit it. "I've decided to make some changes," Victoria continued. "Starting with appointing Marcus as the new head of our employee welfare program. He understands better than anyone what our workers need to thrive." Richard looked up in surprise. "You can't be serious." "I'm very serious. And one more thing, I think it would be good for you to spend some time working directly with the foundation. Perhaps if you meet the families we help, you'll develop some compassion." Richard wanted to argue, but the determination in Victoria's eyes told him it would be futile. For the first time in their marriage, he realized he might have pushed too far. Across town, Marcus was walking Lily to school, telling her about the previous night's events. "So your letter made a big difference, sweetheart. Mrs. Harrington was very touched by what you wrote." Lily beamed up at him. "I just told the truth, Daddy. You're the best daddy in the world, and I wanted everyone to know." Marcus squeezed her hand, his heart full. "Well, thanks to you, things are going to be a little easier for us now. I'm going to be able to go back to school, and you might even get to go to a new school with more opportunities." Lily considered this for a moment. "Will you still have time to read me stories at night?" Marcus laughed and knelt down to her level. "I will always have time for that. No matter what changes, you're still my priority. Always." Satisfied with his answer, Lily hugged him tightly before skipping into her school building. As Marcus watched her go, he marveled at how quickly life could change. Just yesterday, he had been dreading an event he thought he couldn't afford to attend. Now, he was facing a future filled with possibilities he had never dared to imagine. In the weeks that followed, Marcus began his management training at Pinnacle Industries. His first project was to develop a program to help employees further their education while working. His personal experience made him uniquely qualified to understand the challenges and create meaningful solutions. Richard, meanwhile, reluctantly began working with the foundation. His first assignment was to visit a community center in one of the city's poorest neighborhoods, where children of working parents received after-school care and educational support. Initially, Richard approached the task with resentment, but something unexpected happened as he spent time with the children. He saw their potential, their dreams, and their determination despite their circumstances. He saw reflections of Marcus in the parents who came to pick up their children after long workdays, their exhaustion evident but their love unwavering. 6 months later, Victoria hosted another gala. This time, Marcus attended not as a janitor but as a rising executive in the company. Lily was by his side, wearing a new dress and beaming with pride for her father. Richard was there too, but he was changed. The arrogance had been replaced by a quieter, more thoughtful demeanor. When he approached Marcus and Lily, there was no mockery in his expression. "Mr. Jenkins," he said, extending his hand. "I owe you an apology. My behavior at the last gala was inexcusable." Marcus studied him for a moment before accepting the handshake. "Thank you for acknowledging that." Richard knelt down to Lily's level. "And you must be the famous Lily. Your letter changed a lot of lives, including mine. Thank you for showing me what true strength looks like." Lily, with the straightforward honesty of a child, replied, "My daddy says everyone deserves a second chance if they're really sorry." Richard smiled, genuinely this time. Your daddy is a wise man. As Richard walked away, Victoria joined Marcus and Lily. He's trying, she said, watching her husband. The foundation work has been good for him. Marcus nodded. People can surprise you. Sometimes all they need is to see the world through someone else's eyes. Victoria smiled. Speaking of surprises, I have news. The board has unanimously approved your proposal for the Employee Education Initiative. We're going to implement it company-wide starting next quarter. Marcus couldn't hide his excitement. That's going to help so many families. It's going to change lives, Victoria agreed. Just like Lily's letter changed yours. As the evening progressed, Marcus found himself reflecting on the journey of the past 6 months. From a janitor invited as a cruel joke to an executive implementing programs that would help others like him, it was almost unbelievable. But the most important change wasn't in his job title or bank account. It was in the knowledge that he had shown Lily that dignity and hard work could overcome even the cruelest intentions. That kindness could triumph over mockery. That they belonged in any room, no matter how grand. As father and daughter danced together in the same ballroom where he had once felt so out of place, Marcus knew that they had both found their way home, not to the mansion or the wealth, but to the confidence that came from being truly seen and valued. And somewhere in the room, Richard Harrington watched them, learning a lesson he had never expected, that sometimes, the people we try to diminish end up being the ones who show us how small we've become. The joke he had planned had failed spectacularly. Instead, it had sparked a transformation, not just for Marcus and Lily, but for Richard himself, and for countless employees who would benefit from the programs born from that fateful night. In the end, everyone was indeed stunned, not by the cruelty of a joke, but by the power of dignity to transform lives, one unexpected invitation at a time.